Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be beginning in just a few minutes. Thank you so much for your patience. We'll be joining in just a couple of seconds. Good morning or good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining today. We will begin in just a few minutes. Thank you so much. All right, thank you, Sam. Let's get started.
Okay, thank you, Brandy. Welcome. My name is Sam Young, Senior Director of Legacy and Planned Giving at Compassionate Choices. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Focus On with Ricardo Thomas, where we cover various topics surrounding effective end-of-life planning. We know that planning equals peace, and your financial estate planning is essential to your end-of-life plan. It is our objective to provide you with sound information that allows you to create the legacy you desire. With that said, let's meet Compassionate Choices Chief Engagement Officer, Brandy Alexander.
Thank you, Sam. I will just share a little bit more about Compassionate Choices before we get started. Compassionate Choices is the largest and oldest nonprofit organization focused on not only expanding choices, but improving end-of-life care through advocacy and education. We envision a society that affirms life and accepts the inevitability of death, and embraces expanded options for compassionate dying, and empowers everyone to choose the end-of-life care that reflects their personal values, priorities, and beliefs. We are a 501c3 organization representing more than 450,000 supporters around the country, including Guam and Puerto Rico. And we began this series as an enhancement of our community engagement work, which is really meeting people where they are and providing the tools so that they can make informed decisions at the end of life. We know that death and dying is a tough topic, but it's necessary for us to do. And end of life is something that we're all going to have to face. And so having the tools to really approach these difficult situations can only help everyone. And so we joined efforts with the development department, as Ricardo says, because lack of planning is hazardous for your health and your wealth. And so this really ties in the importance of financial planning as a part of that plan, because incorporating your end-of-life care wishes and what happens to your assets is the best way to really ensure that your legacy lives on, as Sam mentioned. So making these plans is one of the most loving things you can do for your family and for your loved ones. And we want more communities empowered with this information, which is why this collaboration is so important. And so we're really going to dive deep into another topic this month, and we have a special treat. We're joined by our newest staff member, an addition to the organization that will really help ensure that we continue to embrace and realize a truly diverse, equitable, and inclusive movement. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Tia Western, Compassionate Choices Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager. And she'll share a piece that she presented at our all staff meeting earlier this month. We thought it'd be a great way to set the stage for our chat today. So Dr. Western, please take it away.
Hello, everyone. And thank you, Brandy. And thank you, everyone, for having me here. And I really am just wanting to give honor to the women who have given their time and their presence here at Compassionate Choices, and to all of you as well, then and now. And so I want to shout out all of our different women at all of your different intersections, to our Black women, to our Latina and Hispanic women, to our Afro-Latina women, to our Asian women, Southern, Western, Eastern, and Central, to our Canadian women, to our trans, queer, gender nonconforming, all of our female presenting and intersex women or people, our European women, our differently abled women, and all of our beautiful women and female presenting persons that I may not have mentioned. All of you are so incredibly beautiful. And I want to remind you that as we celebrate Women's History Month, that history isn't just about the sensationalized newsmakers that we hear about. Your history is you. Even as you sit here today and make your planning for your end of life care and for your family, that is a part of your history and your history making. And so I just want to remind you that making history, making women's history can be as loud or as quiet as you want it or need it to be. And you're being here even today. And the various things that you do today, even outside of here, that is a part of your making history. So shout out to all of you. And I hope you make sure to celebrate yourself and celebrate the women in your life and the female presenting persons in your life. So I will hand it back over to Brandy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Western. That was so powerful. We appreciate you taking the time to shout out how much diversity there is when we talk about celebrating women and women presenting people. And so I'll now pass it on to our host, Mr. Ricardo Thomas from our African American Leadership Council. Ricardo, thank you so much.
Thank you, Brandy, and hello and welcome to another episode of our Focus On series brought to you by Compassion and Choices. As we know, March is Women's History Month, and in this episode, we will be speaking with two dynamic women who are doing great work in their efforts with CNC. We'll talk about their career journeys as well as the impact that they're making in their respective roles with CNC. So without any further delay, let's welcome our two very special guests. First, we have Kim Callanan, who is the president and CEO. And second, we have Ms. Kiana Cornish, who is the Chief Development Officer. So ladies, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And I believe Kim.
Thanks so much, Ricardo. It's really a pleasure to be here.
I'm certainly glad to have you. I got to tell you, both of you, I've been eagerly waiting for this program today and talking to both of you. So let me just kind of lay out the framework for our conversation. No pressure here. So we'll frame our conversation into two parts. As we said, we're celebrating Women's History Month. So first, we'll talk to each of you about your backgrounds and professional journeys. And then in the second phase, we'll transition into a discussion on the work that each of you do in the space of end-of-life planning and talk about those resources that are available to folks who are experiencing end-of-life care situations. So with that said, let's get started. So Kim, we're going to start with you. Can you share with our audience today a little bit about your background and your professional journey?
Absolutely. So I started my professional professional life as a grassroots organizer. And the thread throughout my entire life has been that I've been about engineering social change. So my earliest time grassroots organizing was in third grade when I organized all the birds in the neighborhood to Save the Bird campaign and saved all the birds there. But I then took that into my profession and did political grassroots organizing. And I've kind of did a little bit of everything that takes place around change campaigns. So I did communications, I've done grassroots organizing, I've done lobbying and jobs, I've run major social marketing campaigns, and ultimately ended up at an organization where I was running a large social marketing and public health practice for them, and did that for about a decade after about a decade in political campaigning. And eventually I got to the point in my career where I decided that I really wanted to be at a nonprofit advocacy organization. That's where my heart was. And I just got really fortunate that there was this bizarre position open at Compassion and Choices at the time that wanted somebody who had all of this varied management experience and an expertise across a lot of different areas. And it looked like this job that they had written for me, like who has experiencing running call centers and information centers and doing grassroots organizing. It was just like a whole bunch of stuff all shoved into one job. But it happened to be exactly the sort of trajectory of my career. So I got really fortunate. It was an issue that I felt passionate about. And I landed my way here about 8 years ago, and I've never looked back. I feel like I found my home.
Well, thank you for that. Certainly, it's been a joy for me in meeting you several years back and working with you, and I'm looking forward to many, many successful years ahead. So with that, we're going to switch over to Kiana. So Kiana, can you do the same for us? Share a little bit about your background and professional journey as well.
Absolutely. And thank you again, Ricardo, for having me today. So my background, similar to Kim, I'm a child of the movement. I grew up with a mother who was really committed to education, also alternative education, and making sure me and my sister learned the things that we were supposed to learn within self-determination and autonomy, and also really knowing that we can do things to change. And so I remember going to marches and rallies with her and saying things like, free the people, free the land, free all South Africans. And so that turned into really, my sister went the path of becoming an attorney and an advocate. And I became a person who got into nonprofit fundraising. And so many of the fundraising positions that I've held have been in the social justice movement, working with communities that are underrepresented and underserved. And I strongly believe in bodily autonomy and self-determination for every person. And so before joining Compassionate Choices last October, I worked for national nonprofits focused on health and human services and advocacy within civil rights organizations. And I also spent 7 years as a vice president of corporate philanthropy and partnership building in the healthcare sector. But it's in this role as the Chief Development Officer that I'm responsible for the organization's fundraising and implementing that strategy that encourages continued support through Compassionate Choices mission and programs, while promoting that culture of gratitude and philanthropy, and really promoting that source of change and choice.
Gotcha. Well, thank you. Now, Kiana, don't give it all away yet. We're going to get into that in a little bit. But to the audience, I told you we have two dynamic ladies here today. And so we're going to expand the conversation. And I'm going to go to our next question here, which I'm going to pose to both of you. So what brought you to choose to work on issues of end-of-life care and planning? Kim, I'm going to bounce back to you first, and then we'll go back over to you, Kiana. So Kim, that question's to you. What brought you to choose to work on issues of end-of-life care and planning?
So like so many people who are involved in this movement, I came to this movement with my own personal experiences around the end of life. I had a grandmother who had an advance directive that wasn't honored, that I can really remember that feeling of disappointing and letting her down during her final days. I had another grandmother who had a long decline from Alzheimer's, and I remember sitting by her thinking, gosh, like there has to be a better way. But it was really my grandfather's death that provided me with the clarity that I needed to realize how important this issue is. With his death, he had made the decision that he was ready to die. He was in hospice care at the time, and he chose to forego treatments, stop his heart medication, and voluntarily stop eating and drinking. And so my mom called us up to let us know that he had made the choice and he was ready to die. And we had a chance to fly down, sit bedside with him, he said his final words to us. We had a beautiful last 24 hours with him. I was holding his hand when he died, and it was just this feeling of closure and completeness. And when you juxtapose that against the way my two grandmothers died, it had me realize that how one dies matters, not just for the dying person, but for those who are left behind. And that's what, when I was, at my other job, which, I made really good money. I was working in the for-profit sector. I had a great team, everything was going right, except I didn't have the passion. I was slow and careful because I didn't need to leave. What I needed to do was find my heart and my soul. And when I saw the job description for Compassionate Choices, I knew that was my heart and my soul. And I'm, delighted to have had the chance to be at the organization for the past 8 years.
Wow. Well, Kim, thank you for sharing that with us. I'm sure everyone in the audience appreciated that information there. So Kiana, I'm going to pose the same question to you. What brought you to choose to work on issues of end-of-life care and planning?
So I have an interesting journey with Compassionate Choices. It's funny, I actually, I came to this organization many years ago, early in my career. I learned about Compassionate Choices because I was actually a candidate to be a development manager. And I ended up taking another offer at the time. And I started like the conversations. I was in the process. But I remember this mission stuck with me. I remember also thinking about how unique it was and seeing the advocacy map at the time and how they had just won California, but the map was so small in terms of impact. And then later on in my career, when this position became available as a CDO, it felt like a full circle moment to come back. But I also think we're in this unique time for choice at large, and I position myself within the choice movement. And so it's a really exciting time to be a part of something so special. And that's what brought me back. So it's kind of been this full circle moment where I learned about compassionate choices about 13 years ago. And then I see it on the other side now as the CDO and helping to lead a fundraising team. It's really special to me. So for me, it's about the fundamental concept of end-of-life care and planning. And that to me is the freedom aspect within the choice, freedom with the plan, as I would say. And we can free family and loved ones from the burdens of our death and the financial weight of preparing for a funeral and the finalizing an estate. And we can be prepared for growing generational wealth and ensuring our loved ones are taken care of in our absence. And
Well,
so
thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that with like advanced care directives
Mhm.
and a conversation within our sphere of support, we can advocate for those final wishes in alignment with our values and how we choose to live our lives and uphold dignity in the process. So planning definitely equals peace because it's our personal freedom in the end of life care, and how we support matters to us and our loved ones.
Well, thank you again. And I'll just share briefly for myself, certainly what attracted me to Compassion and Choices. I think to a person, everyone I have met thus far who is a part of Compassion and Choices shares a similar string as far as a life experience, with a family member and recognizing those challenges, and more importantly, recognizing the importance of talking about it, getting help, and getting resources to make it a little bit easier. So again, I thank the both of you for sharing that background information there. But Kiana, I'm going to stay with you here with this next question. And here it is. So what challenges, and again, we're still on the career side here, focusing on Women's History Month. What challenges have you faced and how did you overcome them as a professional?
So, as a woman in leadership, you're always faced with a lot of challenges. You're faced with the challenge of your voice and getting comfortable with that as a leader, and making sure people can hear, respect, and you have a seat at the table where you're being listened to and heard. But also as a woman of color and a woman in fundraising, I've specifically been faced with the challenge of kind of broadening the sphere of how people come to engage with certain communities, right? Naturally speaking, communities of, a white male who it might be, 56, suit and tie, clean cut, seem to be the donor profile, or, a white woman, similar, might be the baby boomer generation is the donor profile. And so how do we engage donors that look like me and you, Ricardo? How do we get buy-in from a fundraising team to also understand that, there's people are philanthropic, Black and Latino communities tied every Sunday to a church. And they, are very philanthropic in their communities, and trying to understand and bridge those gaps to strengthen a donor pool truly, and to engage people within the mission of a cause like CNC. And so those have been challenges from not only the buy-in from the board or leadership at large in my career, but also the buy-in from motivating a fundraising team, and also getting people comfortable with moving in spaces and communities that don't always look like them, but knowing that those people have value, they have stories, and they also share an experience, and oftentimes a philanthropic one too. And so, and building that kind of mindset out has been challenging in my career, but I'm very committed to issues of diversity, equity, inclusion. And I always try to make sure that we are steering a philanthropic conversation to all of those communities.
Well, thank you, Kiana. Kim, it's your turn. I pose that same question to you. What challenges have you faced and how did you overcome them?
So this is one that was a little bit of a challenge for me to answer because by nature, I'm an optimistic person and I hate to look at kind of what's harder. So I'm just going to throw it out there that this was a challenge and difficult for me to be authentic around. But I would say that the biggest challenge that I face is that it feels as if throughout my career, but especially since becoming the CEO, that I am held to a higher and a different standard that men are. Every man that I have ever experienced who was a CEO, the only thing that people are evaluating them on is, are you putting forward a vision? Can you raise money? Are you achieving results? And that's where it stops. If the male CEO is doing all of those things, there's nothing else. There's no more conversation to be had. But for me, it's been a really different experience. It's been an experience of being evaluated based on whether or not people feel as if what I communicated sounded tough enough, or did I come across as too direct? Was I caring enough? Oh, I was too harsh there. It feels like a constant kind of barrage of criticisms over who I am as a person or as a leader, as opposed to the results that I have achieved. And it sometimes, it sometimes gets tough. It feels like, gosh, like, why is everybody minimizing the challenge or the talent of what it is that we're accomplishing? And why do I not get credit for leading us through that? And instead, the focus and the emphasis is on, something that no male has ever, in my experience, been evaluated on. So I would say that that's been like the hardest part in the role of the CEO for sure. But I do want to close out just because I hate focusing on the negative, to just say that we have this incredible supporter base. And when I became the CEO, I got embraced by our donors and supporters in a way that was so uplifting, and the board in a way that was so uplifting and inspiring and supportive. And so, when I go out to a hearing and there might be somebody there who doesn't recognize me as the CEO and turns to the staff person next to me who, is not the CEO and kind of, defers to them as if they're the person in authority, and it feels really deflating to me. What lifts me up is our donors and our supporters. They've been truly have had my back every step of the way.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. And I will say, again, I'm a bit of an optimist as well. I think we are currently now in an environment in this country where women are being more respected, more appreciated and recognized in the professional workspace. And I think it will only get better as folks are now being held accountable, with that. So to both of you, thank you for your input with those questions. So as we start to make our transition over, I have one last question in this section here. Kim, this one will be back to you. What are some of the ways women have made an impact on the mission of Compassion and Choices?
So I would say from the beginning, women have really shaped the mission, the vision, the programs of Compassion and Choices, starting with Barbara Coombsley, who was my predecessor and kind of the founder. I know there were others with her in the beginning, but she was really the lasting founder of CNC. She was the co-author of the Death with Dignity Act. She was the lead petitioner when the act advanced, and then led the movement for 20 plus years, really moving it from this sort of fledgling baby out to being national. You have the great Dr. Omega Silva, who is the head of the American Medical Women's Association, and decades before anybody else in medicine was coming forward or and really declaring support, she got the American Medical Women's Association behind medical aid in dying. She also happened to be a Black woman, so like way before her time. What a pioneer she was. You have the amazing Dolores Huerta, civil rights activist, who has, championed both end-of-life choice, medical aid and dying, and, the full breadth of end-of-life care options across the country, and has had an immeasurable impact on the movement, especially on the California campaign. When you look at our storytellers, we've had some really amazing storytellers that were women that really shaped this movement. Barbara Mancini, an early storyteller who got jailed for her father's death. Brittany Menard, who was the beautiful 29-year-old woman who moved from Oregon to California. Mary Klein, along with Stella Dawson, her partner in the DC area, who was really the face of the DC law. And those are just a few. They really represent some of the early pioneer storytellers. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention the amazing Brandy Alexander, who you heard from earlier today. But Brandy has been a part of this movement for 17 years, 19 years. She'll have to come on and tell me what the right number is. But she really has championed our work to foster a diverse, equitable, and inclusive movement. And it is her vision and her longevity and her perseverance that has really pushed us forward and helped us to see a broader vision for this movement. So she deserves huge kudos. And then if you look across the staff, I should have looked at the numbers beforehand, but I would guess we're probably about 65% women. So you've got a lot of very powerful women throughout the organization that are leading the way.
Thank you for that. And so, Kiana, I'm going to pose the same question to you, but I would like for you to answer it from the lens of philanthropy. So what are some of the ways women have made an impact on the CNC mission from a philanthropic standpoint?
So I would say that for all the things that Kim said, and Kim, I want to give a nod to you being our fearless leader and also a woman in this movement, and really becoming the true expert now in this movement as the voice out there. But I would say from a philanthropic standpoint, the general profile of our donor is a widowed baby boomer woman who is really kind of the ones that we engage most often. I will also say that women are committed to this movement because they are the caregivers of their families and the ones who know firsthand what it's like to bear witness to end-of-life issues. And it's women who truly understand that choice is justice and options are freedom here. And so I would also think that we have amazing philanthropic impact donors like Joan Haberman, who upholds the torch of CNC's mission. So our movement of donors tends to be women.
Well, I'm certainly glad to hear that. And that's a perfect segue as we get into part 2 and talking about the benefits of planning for end of life and the tools that are available through CNC. So let me start with a little bit of background information here. The reality is over the next 20 years, as it relates to wealth transfer, there's about $69 trillion that will transfer from baby boomers to the next generation. And many of those folks who will be the recipients of this new wealth will be women. So from that end, here's my question, and I'll go back to Kiana first, and then I'll go over to Kim for some input there. So how do women impact development and major gifts in the space of CNC? And again, you were just talking about philanthropy, from a women's perspective and so forth, but can you elaborate on that from the standpoint of the fact that there's so much wealth being transferred over the next 20 years? What are some things that women should look at to be able to leverage this new wealth and be able to be more impactful in their giving and in their community, period?
Yeah, so our experience at Compassionate Choices proves that women are some of the most generous philanthropists and often support dozens of nonprofit organizations throughout their lives. As you heard earlier, Sam said planning equals peace, and financial and estate planning are integral to our end-of-life planning. And so we want to be a partner in continuing this journey together and have resources that can assist you. And I encourage women to know, because like you said, with the greatest wealth transfer in our history, and almost 69 trillion through estates in the next 20 years, it's imperative for us to explore all of the tax-wise strategies to preserve intergenerational wealth transfers and help women create legacies more for their families. So we have complementary resources like Free Will that will allow you to create a valid will in 20 minutes and leave a planned gift to a charity you choose. Everyone needs a will, and the process does not need to be costly or burdensome. And I think as women are the ones who are oftentimes left with the planning of a funeral, or left with kind of picking up the pieces of an estate, it's great for education to be happening at that component, the level. And so another tool that we can ensure is that medical wishes are honored. And we also want to empower you to have financial vision honored as well. So we want to help you continue to support the causes that were important during your lifetime and communicate those wishes with your heirs and take care of your loved ones. And oftentimes women are the ones advocating for those things because time is of the essence. And it's not a one size fits all. And Sam Young is also available for consultation to explore the options that may be best for women and their families.
Gotcha. Thank you. And Kim, we're going to frame it this way, so I'll let you add on to that. But also, as you're responding to that, I would like for you to talk about some of the resources that are available for people at that time of end of life planning. We realize that in many households, 73% of the caregivers are female. And as you shared with us earlier at the beginning of our conversation, you talked about some of the challenges even in your own family, with family members and having to make those vital decisions at the end of life. So can you elaborate not only from the philanthropic side, from a women's perspective, but also the resources that CNC has that can help make a difficult time period a little bit easier by having a roadmap, if you will, with those resources that are available?
Yeah. One of the most heartbreaking experiences that I have in this job is when I visit one of our longtime donors and I arrive at their house, and they have entered into a state of middle-ish dementia. They're living in an assisted living facility of sorts. I come to find out through around circuitous conversation where eventually they'll get me in touch with somebody that they have not put any of their wishes in writing. One of the hardest moments I had was actually when I first became the CEO. I joined a woman there, and she kept saying to me, I'm so glad you're here. Call him and tell him what I want. You have to tell him. And she's pointing at Compassion and Choices magazine, and she's like, tell him my wishes. And I'm like, there's nothing that I can do at this point. I could guess what your wishes are, but not going to mean anything, not legal for me to do that. You've got to put it in writing. And the only positive thing was that happened it was literally like my first week as CEO that happened. And I had 4 visits like that in a row. And that made me recognize that even among our own supporters, we're not taking the steps that are necessary in order to make sure that our future is safeguarded. And when you take steps, you really leave your family members, you're giving them the gift of peace of mind. And when you don't take the steps, you're leaving them in a position where they have to make heart-wrenching decisions. Now, we have made it much easier for you to take those steps. And we have some really, really helpful tools. We have our end of life planning guide, which I hope someone will put the link in the chat. But it's a really simple to use guide that helps you understand what your values and priorities are. We have an amazing dementia values and priorities tool. If there's one thing that you do other than your advanced directives, or 2 things I would say, Pick the right healthcare proxy, someone who's really going to represent you and who's willing to go through and understand your values with you in advance, and then fill out our dementia values and priorities tool. The tool will help you to choose the point at which you want different levels of care should you end up getting dementia. And so many people say, I don't want to live that way, but the reality is if you're taking care of someone who has dementia, what it means to live that way is not clear. And what it is that you want them to do is not clear. And what this tool does is it makes it clear. It takes the guesswork out and it puts the power in your hands while you're still mentally capable and in your healthcare advocates' hands to execute on your plan. So those are some of the simple tools. I will reinforce, while our mission is all around end-of-life care and planning, that as an organization, we get a huge percentage of our revenue comes from legacy gifts. So if you are committed to us and we're an issue you care about, think about making a legacy gift to us. And we make it really easy for you. And you can become a part of our legacy circle, and then you get my leadership circle emails, and you get to be a part of our inner circle conference calls. So there's all kinds of fun benefits you get by becoming a legacy member.
Wow. Well, thank you, Kim.
I would be a bad CEO if I didn't do a shameless plug, right, Ricardo?
Well, you've covered it all. And believe it or not, we've come to the end of our time for today's episode. But I certainly want to say thank you to both of you for the information that you shared, not only about the various resources that are available through end of life planning and CNC, but also your particular journeys to lead you to where you are now. I want to reiterate again that there are many resources available. Feel free to visit the Compassion in Choices website. We also want to say to everyone who registered to participate today that you will receive a follow-up email where you will receive a link to today's episode, as well as a way to go to the website to find out more valuable information about the dementia tools and other information that can be helpful to you as you experience or have to make those vital end-of-life decisions. Again, his name has been mentioned a few times, Sam Young. For those of you who are philanthropically inclined, please reach out to Sam Young to find out more ways that you can give and support the great efforts of CNC. And with that, again, Kim Callanan, thank you again. Always a pleasure speaking with you and seeing you. And to Kiana Cornish, who I've had the pleasure of meeting recently, thank you very much for participating with us. Yeah. Thanks again to all of the audience who joined us today as we celebrate Women's History Month. For those of you who have joined us for the first time, we hope it's not your last time as we try to put together these episodes every month with vital information to help make end-of-life planning a little bit easier. As our slogan goes, planning equals peace. So thank you again and have a good day.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.